Hello and welcome to Founded, an Airwave Media podcast, where we find the stories you missed in history class because the tea was hot before they dumped it into the harbor. I'm Tori Phantom, and joining me today is someone who doesn't know the floor is lava.
I am not touching the floor. I am like, I can't, feet are not free, so I won't show you, but I am not touching the floor. I am in my chair.
Gwenna Lathland is safe. I hope the rest of you are. Feet off the floor. Floor is lava. On today's episode of Founded, I am introducing you to Founded Find Outs. These are essentially historical side quests. You know, when you play a video game and there's these little mini fetch quests that don't impact the story a whole lot, but they're still fun to play and sometimes give really good loot.
Yeah.
History is full of them. All sorts of interesting side quests that are completely optional. So on Founded Find Outs, we'll be exploring the American Revolution side quests in these little mini-sodes on Founded.
Yeah. So normally these won't be on Fridays. We're choosing to do this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, little known fact, we don't actually record on the day that you get to listen to it. So as we record this, it is just a little bit before Thanksgiving. But first, we need to do Founded Find Out, which will be minisodes published when? How often are these coming out?
That's a great question. I don't know.
How long will this one be?
I don't know. That's a great question.
What will they cover? What we know it's a side quest, cool, but what does that mean?
So what we're going to be doing on the Founded Find Outs is covering things like forgotten founding figures or questions that people send in about what they wanted to find out next, or perhaps a book I just read that I really need to talk about. I basically only read history books, so it is related. Also, speaking of books, you should go pre-order Gwenna's new book. There is a link in the description. It's called Thinky Thoughts. It's really great. It's not history, but it is incredible.
It's my history. It's some of my history. It's a little bit of my history. It is nominally historical because I'm actually older than you think I am.
But this extra part of Founded is for the stuff that doesn't fit into the mostly kind of chronological story we've been telling on the main show. So this is extra stuff that I just like to talk. Okay. I like to talk about history. Here we are.
Now, here's the other thing is not all of the Founded minisodes will be by Tori, is because occasionally Gwenna has some additional historical context, because while I don't know much about the American Revolution because I went to public school like many of us, I did actually study history in college. I just didn't specialize in American history or history around this period at all. But sometimes I have specialized knowledge that is not impactful at all to the total series, but might be fun to share. So occasionally you might get a completely different flavor of history as presented by Gwenna.
Yeah. And you would be shocked how often the era of history that Gwenna has studied directly influenced the time period that we talk about here, because it's English history.
I did study 15th, 16th, and a little bit of 17th century England for a protracted part of my study. But notice it stops right before it gets interesting here.
So we're a good team. I like that about us. But speaking of the emails and comments, I find it incredibly important before we get to the main part of this episode. Okay. I have to let you know that we have gotten many emails and comments from our Founded friends in New England who have let me know that selectmen are in fact still a thing. And the town meetings. Yeah. And many of our New Englanders were more surprised that I had to explain selectmen because they didn't realize that it wasn't a universal thing, which I find really interesting. And also really cool that the tradition of town meetings and selectmen is still going.
No, that is really neat. Because I live in Oklahoma, which is one of the newest states to the union and has its own horrid history, I can't always tell when something is normal everywhere else and I'm the odd one.
You're usually the odd
Or
one in
if that
Oklahoma.
is unique to an area. And because we always do it, we always think, oh, well, this must be everyone's reality because it's been mine for so long.
Yeah. That's exactly it. I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, which is a stone's throw away from New England, and I didn't even know that. But also, one more thing before we get into the main part of this episode here. Okay?
Yeah.
If you are watching this episode on YouTube, you can see my shirt. That's right. We have founded merch. We have a threatening huzzah with a little cloud. And under that, it says, burn it all down. Feeling frustrated and unheard? Try shouting huzzah in a threatening manner. Start a bonfire. Bring your friends. But it is not our only merch. In fact, I had to make sure that we had 3 threatening huzzah shirts because, as we know, it had to be 3.
Huzzah!
And
huzzah! Huzzah!
There's also some other fun stuff. One of my favorites being a shirt that says, Samuel Adams would be mad about this. I design them all and make myself laugh, so I hope that you all enjoy them too. There'll be a link in the description, but I am so excited to get into the actual episode-y part of the episode.
Yeah, so more behind the scenes, because this is just going to be a little bit of a all of the above episode. But I very, very rarely know anything that we are talking about. Occasionally, I am given a piece of homework because I need a hair's breadth of context before Tori explains something to me. Or I am given a heads up because I accidentally discovered something and have to ask, am I allowed to read this book or does it contain spoilers?
I very much appreciate that you're not cheating on the pop quizzes. So.
I'm not cheating on the podcast. I am finding this out in real time. However, I also get occasional texts that will say, do not under any circumstances look up Harbottle Dorr. Which, by the way, was a real text that I got. And Tori, I need to explain to you, I was never, that collection of letters was never going to arrange itself in my brain. And then I would follow that incredibly impossible experience by going, I should Google that.
Right. I mean, you never know. You could just be in a scroll hole. And,
so I did not look up any spoilers for Harbottle Dorr upon your request, but I also promise you I was definitely not going to do that.
Well, good. But here's the thing. This specific founded forgotten figures moment is a gift for you, Gwenna.
Okay.
Because
I'm not mad.
If you don't know this, Gwenna loves social history. And
I do
today,
love social history.
We are talking about one Harbottle Dorr, yes, that's his real name, who was an incredibly degular guy who lived in Boston during the Revolutionary era.
We love it. Was he there the whole time? Like, did he get all the way through the smallpox and the battles?
He was such a regular guy that even after the war, he never really left his community and he continued to serve his community, okay?
All right.
So let me give you some quick fast facts. We'll give a little background, okay? Harbottle Dorr was a merchant who sold hardware and boat parts that lived from 1730 to 1794. He was a patriot and an early member of the Sons of Liberty who served in the war and supported the cause as most did in the normal way. Like, he didn't change the world or help establish the new government or do anything extraordinary. His father was a leather dresser whose name was, any guesses?
Soft Jar?
It was Harbottle Dorr.
Okay, Soft Jar. Just for the difference. Soft Jar, birth, hard bottle. Harbottle. I'm adding a syllable in there.
So,
a syllable? A letter. I don't know. I've lost the thread of this entirely. Continue. Don't even edit that part out. Just leave it in.
Okay, that's fine. Now, Harbottle Sr. and Harbottle Jr. were solidly working middle-class men. And when Harbottle Sr. died in 1746, Harbottle Jr. was left no inheritance because his
Mm.
father died with so much debt that the assets he did have immediately belonged to the debtors. However, listed in his assets by the executors of his estate was a decently sized library, especially for the time. We're talking, are you ready? I have numbers. He had
37 books.
33 books.
I was
40
being facetious.
But historically speaking, so he had 33 books, 44 pamphlets, and a relatively expensive Bible, which is notable because historically speaking, books were not easily accessible. Like many of the wealthy class struggled to obtain the books that they wanted.
Also, sidebar in history, the way they were bound at the time meant they fell apart really easily. A lot of them were hand bound with sewing and some threads. Sometimes there was, anyway, books fell apart kind of easily at the time. I'm not talking like you pick it up and it just sort of disintegrates, a brand new book, but like it didn't age as well as our books age now. So like a book didn't necessarily have the life. The very, very rich would be able to afford to keep the books in good condition for longer, and they would also be able to have them rebound. The middle class and lower, you might be able to pass a book on for a few generations before it's just like a cluster of leaves that you're just sort of handing between some press board.
Honestly. And having any books, a lot of time families were lucky to have one book, and it was usually the Bible. So having any more books than that, especially when you're in that rung of the social ladder, that was a lot. And that little library is why we're talking about Harbottle Dorr Jr. today, because Dorr would have grown up with access to that library. And as we've discussed, Massachusetts had one of the highest literacy rates at the time, in part thanks to the old Satan's Deluder law that required public schools based on the town's population. So they would have to have schools based on...
It's just the wildest thing to name a law that ended up creating schools, but like it created schools. So
well, it's connected
live and let live, bros.
It's connected to the Puritan culture.
Because, no, we figured that out. We didn't need that explanation.
Well, it was because they thought that making sure children could read so that they could read the Bible would serve everyone better. And somewhere along the way, and possibly because of that little library, Harbottle learned some bookish things, from prefaces to annotations to indexes. And while Harbottle was just a regular merchant living in the town of Boston during the Revolution, he also left an incredible gift to historians.
Bunch of journals, didn't he?
Even better than that. You see, Harbottle Dorr began collecting the newspapers from Boston and surrounding towns in the beginning of 1765 during the Stamp Act crisis because he felt like something important was happening. And he continued collecting all of these papers along with pamphlets and other editions for over 10 years. And he didn't just collect the papers that supported the Patriot cause. He also collected the Loyalist papers. And in that time, his collection grew to include 3,314 newspaper pages from 805 newspapers under 13 different titles, including the Boston Gazette, which happens to be a favorite of mine to read, along with 204 pamphlet pages and 23 other pages. Here's where it gets more interesting. Harbottle didn't just collect the papers, he annotated them, sharing his opinions, adding footnotes, filling the margins, and clarifying vague references that showed up in articles. I mean, you remember that article I told you about in the Boston Gazette after the Andrew Oliver devil boot in the Liberty Tree riot? You know, the one that insinuated that a little black cloud was responsible for all the rioting and destruction? Yeah, Harbottle Dorr left a note on that article where he wrote, quote, "This refers to the first stir we made to oppose the Stamp Act and forced A. Oliver to resign."
So he's just straight up, okay, we're sort of dramatic about the language, but we're aware. Here's what happened.
You know he was giggling while he was writing that, too.
So Harbottle Dorr was the bibliophage of the lead up to the American Revolution in Boston.
Yes. He was responding to the news as it happened, as a person living during these times. He didn't go back and write it all down later. He was like live tweeting his responses in the margins.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what he did. He took all of the colonial virals and just started live tweeting them.
Yeah, but that's not all. He also identified many of the writers behind various pseudonyms and noted the full names of public figures that were often only referred to as their initials in the papers. And
so he's also doxing people on colonial Twitter. Got it.
yeah. And he also created a reference system using over 100 reference marks, from a typical asterisk to ice cream cones, balloons, and a log.
So he added emojis as well.
Yeah. And within that system, he created a method to cross-reference to the other papers and articles in his collection. But wait, there's more. Harbottle Dorr Jr. also wrote out 4,969 index terms across 133 index pages by hand, which worked out great because he also numbered every page in his collection. He ended up with 4 volumes of papers by the time he wrapped up the project. Volume 1 had 8 index pages, Volume 2 had 16, Volume 3 had 37, and Volume 4 had 72 index pages. But the way he indexed things was kind of funny sometimes. There were entries including things such as, quote, North Carolina men kill beaver and make uneasiness. Or printers on their bad spelling. Or toads, a cure for cancers.
You know, honestly, that one has not stopped yet, I don't think.
Yeah, there's something there. I don't know. Also, eater, a remarkable one that had 3 stomachs. And
what?
Even 3 stomachs. Real good eater there. Yeah. And also, vampires, with 2 entries for that. 1 an account of, and 1 an essay against, as index options.
Harbottle. Listen, no, I appreciate an archivist, because that's essentially what Harbottle Dorr Jr. made himself into was an archivist. I appreciate an archivist who's like, listen, I don't think this applies, but just in case the vampires be a thing in the story, I'm leaving them. I am not going to be the judge of what information is important for the historical record.
Right. But I want you to guess one of the most frequently indexed terms. They have to do with one subject, one person in particular.
Is it Tommy Boy?
It's Thomas Hutchinson. He is one of the most commonly indexed words. So I'll tell you what. In Volume 3 alone, there was a full 3 pages with 9 columns each devoted to Hutchinson. Harbottle Dorr Jr. hated him. Don't worry, I've brought examples of things that Harbottle Jr. had to say about Thomas Hutchinson across these papers.
Oh, Tommy boy.
And these are things like in the margins, in the footnotes. Okay, so in response to an article written in 1765 that stated that the colonies had no rights of their own, Dorr noted in the margins, quote, Hutchinson Doctrine.
Whoa. He's out here indexing and running his mouth.
Yes. In a different article that wondered, quote, if our governor is a mere tool of arbitrary minister of state.
Yes, but go ahead.
Dorr said, quote, he certainly is one.
There is a reason why, on average, headline writers are encouraged not to ask rhetorical yes/no questions because that's what happens. But half the readers go, yes. Moving on. I don't need your article for that.
Right. And
he is a government shill. We know.
It is important to note that eventually, and we've talked about this before, but as a reminder, Thomas Hutchinson does eventually become the royal governor. Not at the point we're at in our main storyline, but so some of these things are coming from that time, okay? Because at another point, Harbottle wrote, quote, Hutchinson is a tool to Hillsborough, Hillsborough is a tool to Butte, and Butte a tool to the devil.
Dang, skipped a couple levels there.
Yeah, and when Hutchinson said he wanted to promote the prosperity of his country, Dorr said, quote, words are but wind, actions speak louder.
Dude, farts are more effective.
Yeah. And sometimes Harbottle would just write, ha ha, written H-A-H, exclamation point for those ha's, as his commentary, which I believe is the 18th century version of LOL.
No, that's the 18th century of Rafflemau.
Yeah.
I think the LOLs, they hadn't degraded communication so low that they had to write LOL. He probably just actually laughed while he wrote that. But if he needed to mark it as ha ha, that was Rafflemau.
You know, I fell down a rabbit hole the other day.
No,
and
don't say.
I have to tell you, their communication was absolutely degraded enough to be down to that LOL, because they would just drop letters and then they would superscript, so they would write the first couple letters of a word, drop the middle, and then superscript the last couple letters to indicate that they have abbreviated the word. Because, I mean, we all know when we read words, we often drop out a lot of those letters.
Yeah.
And so when you're reading their writing, a lot of the time they're just like, less letters is better.
Listen, but also they were handwriting all of this. I abbreviate and I type.
But there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's fun. But back to Harbottle, who also had some nicknames for Hutchinson.
Yes, I like nicknames. Give them. I'm willing to replace nicknames.
Including, but not limited to, vile hypocrite and slanderer.
I don't think I'm going to call him that one on the podcast. Okay.
Yeah, probably not a good one. We also have...
It's too wordy.
It doesn't roll off the tongue. We also have arch fiend.
Whoa, that one has potential.
An easy one, traitor.
Okay, listen. There are complicated matters when it comes to traitors, especially if we're talking loyalists versus patriots. Okay.
Yeah. And then we also have where he would sometimes see something about Hutchinson or something that Hutchinson had wrote, or a quote of something he said, where in the margins, Harbottle Dorr Jr. would just write, quote, oh, the villain.
Archfiend is currently in the lead. Might be Archfiend Hutchison from here on out. Thanks, Harbottle.
Now, we've previously discussed that everything is way more nuanced and complicated than to just call Hutchinson a villain. He was a complicated person trying to make decisions that he thought were for the greater good, whether they were the best decision or not. Probably he was trying his best.
Everybody thinks they're on the right side of the conflict. Yeah. Everybody thinks they are on the correct side of the conflict.
Yeah. And it's pretty obvious that Harbottle Dorr Jr. had some incredible bias.
Mm-hmm.
But he also had incredible passion. And it is hard to be objective while living through unprecedented times. Especially when you simply...
We know, Tori!
But especially when you can't access all of the details that would help you find objectivity, right? It's not,
well,
it's not black
honestly,
and white.
Somebody doing that much interfacing, because it's not just reading it and then setting it down. It's reading it and going back to it. It's reading it and then seeing something else that is related to it. So going back to it again to double check now with new context, because that's inherent in the process of indexing it. Indexing is going through and writing down on sort of a master sheet. Oh, you want to see every time someone mentioned Thomas Hutchison, which means every time he got a new entry, he had to go back and add to that page with the index. It was a long, complicated, time-consuming process that you're not doing in your spare time. You are carving out of your day time specifically to do this. And if anyone had a really good bead on anything that could provide some objectivity or some context for what's happening to his home in Boston, it would be Harbottle. And even he was like, dude, I don't freaking know.
Right. And we do know that Harbottle was a member of the
Right.
Sons of Liberty. I don't know. I always get tripped up on that word. Uh, but he was a patriot
Hmm.
and he supported the cause because Harbottle believed that freedom came from restricting the use of power. Because when someone or a governing body had the ability to control and unfairly limit the actions of others, it would lead to evil and corruption. So the people must control the power in whatever way possible, including mobs and riots when necessary. He believed that power was given as a gift from the people and it should be used for the good of the people, not for those who have it. And he even believed that anarchy was better than tyranny and far less dangerous.
There, we can't actually say the Harbottle said good things, and if we add more context,
Yeah, well,
like Harbottle.
here's the thing with Harbottle, okay? He absolutely hated privilege. Wealth wasn't as much of a concern to him. The wealth disparity, the social hierarchy, none of that bothered him as much as those born with privilege. And in the words of Bernard Bailyn in his book, Faces of Revolution, Personalities and Themes in the Struggle for Independence, he says, quote, Dorr hated anyone identified with what he took to be the arbitrary actions of the British state, but his deepest loathing was reserved for those with the power who were privileged by birth, people whose advantages and authority were ascribed, unearned, unnatural, invidious. Privilege was suspect, corrupting in its nature, and a source of misery for the world at large.
It's interesting that he separated privilege from wealth because in modern society, a lot, not exclusively, but a lot of privilege is directly tied to how much access to wealth you have.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that back then, no. You can have people with money that do not have privilege. The best blacksmith in town is probably well paid to smith, but because of the way the classes worked out and how your profession directly impacted how high in the social hierarchy you could climb, you could be a very wealthy, modest man.
Yeah.
You could be a very wealthy man that had almost no privilege or power, save maybe those couple appointments that you got because you are the best blacksmith in town and people do respect you. So now you get to be a selectman or now you get to be a circuit judge. Like you get this like volunteer honor that doesn't make you richer,
Yeah.
but it gives you just a little bit of power, but doesn't come with any privilege. What Harbottle was separating out was those guys who, well, my great granddaddy saved the king's life once, and so now we have a castle.
Yes. That's exactly it. Because at this time, the wealth disparity was way smaller than it is now.
Yeah.
It wasn't as much about the wealth because, like you said, a blacksmith is still middling class. They are still working class. They're not going to jump up the social ladder and suddenly be considered a gentleman. That's not how it worked. So Harbottle hated the people who were born with privilege that didn't earn it. They didn't earn that respect, those titles, that power that they were using to not help the people that they were supposed to serve.
Yeah.
Which is, the antithesis to Thomas Hutchinson, who was born into this family. There were the three families that just kind of continued to intermarry to consolidate power. He was born with all of this privilege. So, of course, he was a target. But in the same way that he hated Thomas Hutchinson and the loyalists in power, he loved the patriots. There was this article written about the soldiers involved in the Boston Massacre. It was written under the pseudonym Power, Samuel Adams. But that article stated that in times of corruption, men desire more unrestrained power, which, quote, intoxicates the mind, and unless those with whom it is entrusted are carefully watched, they will be apt to domineer over the people instead of governing them according to the known laws of the state. And continuing in this article, he wrote how the laws in the Constitution are the foundation of public tranquility and the sole guarantee to liberty. And to this article, Harbottle Dorr wrote in the margins, "This is orthodox and is my political creed."
Yeah. If you give too much power, then they will switch to not ruling, but just collecting more power.
Yeah.
If you give the guys who want power, it turns out it won't stop them from wanting power. They'll just want more. And if there's no more power to be had, they'll start taking it from other people.
Mm-hmm. And that was a big theme for the Patriots. They wanted power to be checked. They wanted to have a just society with laws.
Like a justice system who could tell an executive branch that they should go ahead and do their jobs.
Yeah. That was the most important part to so many of them. And one of the things they were always fighting with the British about at this point, because they were taking away their independent judiciary, which was promised by the British Constitution and brought over to the eventual Constitution they would create, because an independent judiciary cannot be corrupted by the power. That's how it's always supposed to work.
Weird.
Yeah. But Harbottle Dorr's papers are truly a treasure trove. And you might be wondering, why did he do all of this?
I'm not wondering. It makes perfect sense to me, specifically as a person. No, I am not curious, but others might be. Please continue.
Fair. But he never actually wrote a long explanation about it, but he did write introductory notes with the indexes before the table of contents in every single volume, where we can gain some understanding. And I usually don't fully verbatim read passages like this, but you're getting Harbottle's full introduction in its entirety right now. Okay?
Okay. Go.
He writes, "This has a deformed body, but a beautiful soul. On reviewing this volume, I find some words in the margins that I've misspelt. I hope whoever peruses will have candor enough to excuse, especially as the remarks were made at my shop amidst my business when I had not leisure to be exact. Inasmuch as newspaper in general contain not only news of the day, but often intelligence of the greatest moment, parentheses, and in general are looked upon as authentic, being often resorted to as valuable records, and perhaps are so, more than any other, saving legal ones, and as persons are in general too negligent of preserving them, end parentheses. And during the period of the following papers, transactions of the utmost importance respecting liberty in general have taken place and are recorded in them. I have thought it worthwhile to collect them, though at a considerable expense and very great trouble, in hopes that in future times they may be of some service towards forming a political history of the country during the shameful and abandoned administration of the despotic ministers of King George III, Harbottle Dorr." And then he adds a footnote. Quote.
Footnoted his own.
Yeah. In consecutive volumes, he would footnote his cross-referencing to the first time he wrote an introductory note. But his footnote here says, quote, "The editor of the Gentleman's Magazine says, quote, though the American transactions may seem tedious at present when every newspaper is full of them, yet they afford materials for an important part of the history of the present times." So his entire introductory note is for us. It is for the future. It is for posterity. I am doing this so that people understand what was actually happening now. And I think that's fascinating.
That's amazing.
Because
I kind of want to like scoop the whole quote and put that as the dedication in my next book. Credited to Harbottle Dorr Jr.
Right.
But like as a quote, just include that as the dedication to that book and all future books, because that's the only reason I'm writing it down, is so later people can read it.
Right. I mean, it's truly incredible.
Now people too, please read my books now. Don't wait till later.
Yeah, just do it now. That's fine. But when you consider it at the time period he was writing all of this,
yeah,
they didn't, I mean, the first several volumes, right? He was collecting these from 1765 to 1776. So the war had only just begun when he stopped this collection,
Yeah.
meaning they didn't even know they were going to go to war. Not in the beginning. They didn't
There
know
was just,
that this was going to happen.
listen, there was a sense of something going down. It felt familiar and strange and maybe like you should pay attention.
But now I want to share the history of how the papers became history, because you could read these papers, Harbottle's annotations, and peruse the indexes on the Massachusetts Historical Society website. And you should. Seriously, there's a link in the episode description to my sources. You'll find it there. Please dig through on your own. And if you find something interesting or funny, let us know. foundedhistory@gmail.com. I want to know what stuff you find, because I've spent hours in there, okay? It's always good.
Also, since we've debuted our merch, would you like a shirt that just says "Ha ha" signed Harbottle Dorr?
You might be onto something there.
Let us know in the email if you would buy both a threatening huzzah shirt, available now, or a "Ha ha" signed Harbottle Dorr Jr.
Yeah, I'm here for it. Now, when Harbottle passed away, his papers were valued at £1 16 shillings, which is almost $200 in today's money.
Yeah.
But they were purchased for £7 10 shillings, which is around $1,100 in today's money. No one knows who purchased them. That we don't know.
Huh. But it was somebody who knew it was important and was willing to pay top dollar for that collection.
Yeah. And it took the Massachusetts Historical Society over 200 years to acquire the whole collection, beginning in 1798, when volumes 2 and 3 were donated by Josiah Quincy, son of Josiah Quincy, who grew up with Abigail Adams' husband, John Adams, and John Hancock, being an important part of the cause, who will get his own minisode someday, because no one's heard of him due to his untimely death of consumption. Everything is tuberculosis.
Yeah.
But they obtained...
And they all die like hamsters.
Literally. But the first volume was purchased from the Dedham Historical Society, where it had sat since 1888. Where was it in those 100 years between? No idea. The last volume, volume 4, was finally purchased in 2011 from the Bangor Museum and History Center, where it had been since 1914. So it wasn't until 2011 that all the volumes were finally reunited.
And they're in Boston now?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But now you might understand how I get so lost in the Boston newspapers from the Revolutionary Times. It wasn't just the things that were happening. It's also Harbottle Dorr's never-ending commentary, and boy, was he snarky.
We love it.
So please.
But I've never known an archivist to not be snarky.
Yeah.
Like, never. Like, they may keep it out of their work, but like on the backside, oh, they had thoughts. They had opinions. Almost none of them were nice.
I believe that. Please check out the annotated newspapers of Harbottle Dorr Jr. on the Massachusetts Historical Society website. Or don't, like, I'm not your boss, but thank you so much for listening to this Founded Findouts mini-sode. Regular episodes will return next week. I hope you found something interesting. Drop an email at foundedhistory@gmail.com and let me know what you want to find out next. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, review, hit all the buttons, do all the things so more folks can find Founded. And remember, we don't see history repeat itself, but we continue to hear the echoes. Founded is an Airwave Media podcast. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like Childproof and Bibliophage, and also a bunch of other shows that don't feature Gwenna and I. We'll see you next time. Well, you'll see us.